There you go. Okay, so now we are recording. The way this is going to work is, well, I want to try and make this as interactive as possible. So if people have questions, go ahead and put them in the comment section. I want to leave quite a bit of time. I schedule these for about a half hour, but usually I try to leave like the second half of it for Q&A, because then we can really get into the individual things that people can have questions about. So first off, just what is Mathshare? I know that some of you have probably just signed up for Mathshare. You heard about it through Bookshare. So Mathshare is a tool that's designed for helping students organize and share their math thinking. So I'm going to open up an example one that we have here. So what you do is you go to mathshare.benetech.org. It's a free tool that is open to all students and educators. It will always be free. There are no restrictions like Bookshare has, if you're familiar with Bookshare. So it's available for everybody for free. And our goal is to then have Mathshare built into as many different learning tools as possible so that we can bring all of that accessibility into those existing tools. Because as I'm sure all of you have discovered, math is not something that is very accessible when it comes to technology. And there's a lot of reasons for it. And we want to really help kind of facilitate and promote that accessibility within math. And a big way that you can help is by giving us feedback. And then also telling all of those providers of curriculum and math tools that, hey, like Mathshare would be fantastic within your product because it has all this accessibility stuff and it helps students work through the problems. So that'd be great. So the way that Mathshare works, just for a quick overview, is that your problems are organized into sets. So this is one of our pre-made sets right here. I'm going to open up this one here. And we've got it set up so that the prompt is at the beginning. And then we have my steps and everything's broken in individual steps. And then students can work on problems right there within the math editor. So in this case, for this one, what I'm going to do is I need to move 7 to both sides. I'm actually going to say that right here. So I'm going to use the dictation tool. We're getting into the accessibility things. And so this first accessibility thing that I'm going to show off is the dictation tool. Right? Because when we're talking about making math accessible, for a lot of students, whether they have a diagnosed learning disability or not, that step between going from what they're thinking and what they could say to writing it or typing it is a very difficult thing for a lot of students. And so by having this built-in dictation tool is a really fantastic way for students of where, right? Like, you know, you can sit next to that student and they could tell you everything, but the second you want them to write it down, like, just not going to happen. And so this is one of the accessibility things that we built in to really help make that math accessible. So if your students are currently writing stuff down, or if they're typing that out and say like a Google Doc, having this built-in speech-to-text tool is going to really help that explanation part of math important. So I'm going to start off by just saying, divide both sides by 7. And it automatically gets added in right there. And I can always go in and I could click and modify things if I need to and delete it and redictate. That's fine. So over here, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the keyboard for this part. So we have a lot of different ways in which students can interact with the text. Because again, when we're going back to the accessibility part, students are going to have many different ways in which they either prefer or that they need to be able to interact with the text. So in this case, if it's going to be keyboard interaction, I can say divide. So I did slash and then 7. And now I'm going to press tab. Oh, nope, it went over. I didn't want to do tab, do arrow. So now I'm going to arrow over to 3.25. And then I could say /7. And now what I'm going to do is over here, I'm going to go ahead and just add the step. So I'm going to click on or select add step. And you can see that's now added up there. So a couple of different things I want to point out as I'm going through and doing this, because we're going to focus on this math toolbar editor first. This is kind of like the math palette. And so when students are working on math, there's going to be different functions that they need to do, you know, based on the types of problems that they're doing, or just simply ways of being able to kind of organize what it is that they're going to be working on. And so we've kind of color coded these so that in yellow, here we have some of our more general things. So we have like cross out and adding in text and calculating in color. But then we have your basic operators here. So the plus, minus, times, divide. We put in a couple of different ways in which they're even displayed. Like, so we have like dot times and then the X times on there as well. And then we have some of the other ones. So now we have square roots and fractions, and then we have geometry over here. And as a teacher, when you're creating these problem sets, you can choose which of these different tools you want to show up in that math palette. So a couple of reasons why we did this is, one, for the color coding, it helps students then kind of remember of like, okay, well, square roots in green. So I'm going to look in the green area. An update that we're going to have coming up later next year will actually refine this even more, so that it's going to be showing less at a time, and students can kind of select which types of palettes they're going to have displayed on there. That'll work out really great for mobile devices as well. So they can then remember, okay, well, I need to go to the green, or if I need to go to the blue. And as a teacher, you can select which ones you want to display when you create that problem set. Now, for this one, what I want to do is these sevens are going to cross out. And this is something that, again, like is really helpful for students to be able to see what they're doing on there, say like when things cross out. Because sometimes if like a 7 just disappeared, like if I did X, well, what happened to the 7s? Like it, you know, it's like, right. So that kind of that separation of like being able to see what actually happens with these things. So I'm going to undo by pressing Command Z on my MacBook. And I'm going to highlight that 7x divided by 7. And I'm going to select this cross out and replace. Now, before I select that, go ahead and take a look. We've got that black tooltip that shows up right there. That gives the kind of the name for whatever that action is. And then it also has the key command. So if I press Control, Delete, Shift, so I'm going to press Control, Delete, and Shift. Control, Delete, Shift. Oh, what did I do? I did something wrong there. Did I do that one right? Control, Delete, Shift. Okay, hold on here. This is going to be, that one's not working. Okay, well, I guess this is like my one mistake on my webinars, which I always seem to do really well at. Control, Shift, Delete. Control, Shift, Delete. Control, Shift, Delete. It's not working for me here. What are we doing here? Nope, 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 nope. Okay, well, I'm going to come back. I'll figure that one out, and I'll send you guys an update on that. But our tool tips are there for a couple of different purposes. Of one, so that you as the educator, if you're working with students, you can kind of see what those things are. We do have a cheat sheet also listed in our help center. So say like for fractions, we have the slash. For the subscript, we've got like the, where you press like shift and then 6, that little like up arrow thing. And so we've got then our different tool tips that are along there. These are really helpful too. These will read out when screen reader users are going through. Now, it's really tough to use VoiceOver on a webinar and trying to use the screen reader tools. So I'm not going to try that in this webinar. Some of our developers that we're working with for Mathshare, especially for the screen reader support, are also blind. And so they're working on a video that will actually then showcase and demonstrate how a screen reader user would navigate through Mathshare. And so I'm really excited about that. That'll be probably released in about January. But what I meant to show you here was that with this cross out and replace, it crosses out that, and now we can put in what was left over. So in this case, those 7s were crossing out, and now we have X. And then over here, we had, this was going to be divided by 7. And for this, I'm selecting that. And then we have this other one of calculate. So calculate is a really nice tool of one, it's a time saver tool for a lot of students. We could, type out 3.25 divided by 7 on a calculator, and we could do that. But also for some students of where it's like, right, that extra step of open a calculator, type in these numbers, it equals, come back to this. That could be, that's a lot of extra steps, and that can be kind of frustrating after a while. And so by using this calculate tool, it lets us do this. Now in this case, probably like a reduced fraction would have been better, something like that, but it's gonna go with this. So we have that. And so now I'm going to tab over and I'm gonna go to dictate, divide both sides by 7. Divide both sides by 7. And I'm going to add in that step. Now this, as a science teacher, again, we've done a lot of like physics and science things. I know that my mainstream students would really struggle with this. My typical students would really kind of struggle with some of these things. But for a lot of students, it's that whole thing of seeing that that's what was crossed out and then this was what was put in place of it is a very helpful thing for students as they're kind of going through. So we've gone through, and this is kind of like the general idea of Mathshare, of where students have this dedicated place to be able to show their work step by step, and then explaining what they were doing as they were going along and the organization process of it. So there's a couple of other things now that we've worked through this problem that I want to highlight on the accessibility parts. So we've tried to make sure that the interface is as limited and straightforward as possible. So we have a few buttons up here at the top. So and you can see that too, whenever you mouse over any of these buttons, you get kind of like this little black caret arrow underneath it to kind of, again, give some visual feedback that, hey, like this is the button that is selected. If I'm going to go ahead and tab through here, you can see that the tab is also navigating through. I'll go back to here. So all problems, and I can select all problems. That will take me back to the whole problem set. I can save my work. Under this help menu one, we have a couple of different things of, say, like a tutorial, accessibility, help center, and feedback. I'm going to show you another thing that we've added in recently. But then in orange, we've separated out that prompt. So we wanted to make sure that some of the feedback that we received is that students would kind of get a little bit stuck on, separating out what am I supposed to be doing from what is my work. And so we put the prompt in this orange bar up at the top so that students are able to very clearly see and refer back to of what it was that they're trying to solve. And we have each step very clearly labeled of step 1 going across with this line kind of dividing it. We kind of took this approach of wanting this to kind of mirror or mimic what regular writing paper, lined paper is like that students are using in the classroom. Because again, some of the feedback that we received is that students having things that looked and worked similar to what they were used to doing on paper was helpful for them. And so we kind of set up our design to be in this way. Later on, we're going to be focusing on having the equal signs all line up as well. Because again, that's something that students are very used to being able to see to help them with that process. So I'm going to now select finish, and this will take us back to my whole set of problems. So one of the things I'm going to share with you guys, I'm going to put this into our chat, and I'll also put it in the comments of the video, is this takes you to a document that Alex and I put together that focuses on the accessibility features. And we wanted to really focus on the feature, but then also what that feature does, and then who does it help. And so really, and for this, we try to be really careful that if we do specify any kind of disability, say like in this case of dyslexia or dyscalculia, we kind of have that as the second part, because we want to focus on how this is going to be helping students, because certainly a lot of these features are designed and intended to help students in math, regardless of whether or not they have a diagnosed disability for it. So in this case, we have the synchronized highlighting. And so what it does is it highlights the text word by word while speaking it aloud. And it does this currently in the equation tool or in the math editor when it has the equation on there. And so people who have difficulty differentiating math terms, it's going to be helping them, such as this will be helpful to people with dyslexia or dyscalculia. And so I've kind of put together a presentation where we go through this. This link will also take you to that document as well. And so with this document, I've linked to this one. This is the one that we'll be updating over time. And so you can see up at the top, I've written down the most recent date. So it's yesterday that I updated this. So we'll always be putting a new kind of like date on there whenever we're updating it as we go along. So the synchronized highlighting is one of them. And Alex, as I'm going through these, feel free to go ahead and chime in. I don't think I need to give you permission for adding in any comments or adding in with the audio at all. And I see we've got a couple more questions here too. Okay, and I see we got a question here of screen reader use and Braille output, and will it function with a Braille display for input and output, and also will it show up in Nemeth code specifically? So, and that was Susan and Sarah. So with the Braille output, That we have not done anything with at this time. We've done a lot with screen reader support, so that as you're going through, it will kind of read out the specific sections within the text as you're going along, and being able to navigate then like from my steps down to the math editor, and whether or not if you want to go through some of these other kind of prompts, so kind of help you more easily navigate through. As for the Braille display support, we have not done any testing with that yet. And that's largely because we've received a lot of different kinds of feedback from educators. Some educators and users saying that they kind of rely on the screen reader for the Braille output. But then other people saying that they want kind of some more built-in support. So Susan and Sarah, let's connect after this via email, because Alex and I would really love to be able to connect with you and talk a little bit more about how it is that your students are using Braille displays and that actual process, and what would be the ideal setup for your students. All right, so I'm going to go back to here. All right, so the Sketchpad is something I didn't demonstrate on this, but the Sketchpad is something where it's a space for the students to be able to draw out their thoughts. And so going back to here, it's this tab right here, switch to Sketchpad view, and this is where students can kind of draw things. So some of the students want to be able to draw out and be able to count them via blocks. We have some really exciting ideas about when we can having some like interactive and fully accessible math widgets that we're hoping will be coming up in the future. Our keyboard shortcuts we've gone over. So those are really helpful things. So if you're using mouse and trackpad or blind or low vision, but then also if you're using screen readers or switch devices, the speech to text, our tooltips, the cross out. Apologize for going through this very quickly here. I should put a link to these slides too. Actually, I think I'll put these slides into our professional development pack, which also has some slides for running your own workshop. And so you can then just take this and customize it however you want. Calculate adjustable fonts. Going to go through word problem support. I want to briefly touch on, but we also see another question here of, so at ETA for college level math, pre-calc, calc, or statistics. So for those math levels, because I think when you first sign up, we asked you kind of like what, I don't know, do we ask what subjects? No, I think it's just what grades. We have some functions built in. We don't have all of the functions that you would need like in calc and stuff like that. Let's see. Yeah, like we don't have, is that just because I'm blanking on this here? Yeah. So these are different ones that you can choose from right now. Now with the math editor tool that we're using as the core for this, it's a tool called Math Live. It's another open source project. That one does have a lot of other tools. We do plan on adding those in. I don't want to overpromise, so I'll just say of like it. Those tools will be available for the next school year. So for the 2020-2021 school year, it'll be available. And a big part is because again, we don't want to overwhelm people with all the tools that are in there. And we're trying to balance the whole thing between of like the 5th grade to like graduate level. But those functions are already available within the math tool that we're using. We've just purposely limited the tools that are available. So it's going to be possible, and we'll add those in as we refine the interface more as we go along. So going back to this then, for the word problems, that was one of the things too that I was really excited about on here. So I'm going to go to the STEM Day problem set. And so for here, we did a couple of different word problems that are built in. Because what it lets students do is that you can set up some of the equations. Like, so in this case, for this one, what I did is I set it up so that, I'm gonna go ahead and edit that problem. I set this one up so that as students are going through, I purposely added in these empty spots and I have the instructions here. Now, I did that, here we go. I want to view this one as a student. So that this would be helpful in kind of like a word problem setup, because then you can kind of form the way that students would want to work through these things. So depending upon the different levels of your students, you could have one version where it doesn't have any of the extra supports. And then you can have another version of that same problem set. You can duplicate your problem set. You can go back in, and then you can add in some equations or some other things that has that structure for students to help guide them along. Students can also do some typing within the box itself there. So going over to this one, this is a very common one that you would see, of where you've got a mix of words and units and different things within there. And so that's something where students can take that, and now they can delete those and start modifying it so that they can work through the problem, and really kind of planning that out of okay, so, all right, well, plane A is going to be X and plane B or plane number 2 is going to be Y, and start separating those things out. All right, and we did cleaning up and explaining your work. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop right there. And so right now, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them into the comment section. And let's see here. And then Alex, let's also talk a little bit about the research, because coming up for the new year, we have some really big plans for getting some research to help kind of guide this feature development. So keep those comments coming. I'm going to let Alex talk about research, and then we'll come back to your questions there.
Yeah, for sure. So quick overview. So I'm Alex Cabral. I do the user research for Mathshare. So my background, I have a history of disability myself, as well as expertise in research of disabilities, particularly non-print disabilities. So one of the things that we're doing for Mathshare is working directly with teachers and students to figure out what accessibility needs that students have, and how to make the program more usable for students, actually in context, so that rather than just being a good idea, it actually works and is functional for what students need it to do. So one of the ways that we're doing with that is partnering with teachers in schools. So if you're interested in participating in user research or just learning more, please feel free to reach out to me or Matt. We're always very happy to work with teachers doing co-design process or getting feedback in whatever way you're comfortable helping.
And I guess so right now, we're trying to focus on, because of some grants that we have, we're trying to focus on schools that are in California. So if any of you are in California, please let us know. How long does the research sessions kind of take, that whole process would teachers kind of expect?
For sure. So typically it shouldn't last too long, maybe 15 to 20 minutes. With teachers themselves, it's just to get a general sense of feedback of how they typically teach math, how you would go, what you would be using Mathshare for, any features that you would need, that sort of thing. For students, it would similarly be kept pretty short, so as not to take up too much time. Yeah, about 15, 20 minutes per student.
And we're using Zoom as the primary video chat function, right? For kind of observations during it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
Zoom primarily, though, again, very flexible. Some people are more comfortable with other tools or more comfortable with the phone call. Or for schools that are nearby, I've also gone up in person. So there is a school in San Francisco that we're working with students with learning differences. So we would actually go up in person to talk with them.
What percent of Mathshare would you say has come from user feedback and requests?
All of it, frankly.
This was not a leading question. Alex has been working on Mathshare a little bit longer than me.
Yeah, everything that's in Mathshare has been worked on with teachers and students, and getting feedback and seeing from everything from the color palette to personalization to the way the math editor is set up to how we're planning on reworking it. Everything's very much grounded in this feedback, which is part of why this is really important, so to make sure that we're going in the right direction.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, so we got a couple questions here. So any idea of when vertical problem set up may be available? And so I think is that where you, of having multiple problems kind of lined up on top of each other? like or no. Or is that kind of like you'd have like this number plus this number is equal to this number kind of thing? Well, to answer that, we've got those, we have aligning on equals, and then as on deck for next semester, the having kind of like the multiple lines thing is something we're still thinking through. We don't have a specific time on our roadmap right now of when we'll be putting that in. Part of it is just trying to get an idea, of like the different ways in which people are going to be doing that. We've gotten some requests for long division, which is going to have a similar approach or similar kind of issues that you'll run into of having multiple lines. So we've been going through, we've been kind of thinking through that a little bit. So I don't have an immediate answer for that, but I can say that if you send me an email and really any of the emails that you receive from Mathshare, you can reply to and they'll come directly to me. If you can, if like whenever there's kind of something like that, if you can kind of write up like an explanation of how that's going to help your students or why they need something like that, that really helps us kind of wrap our heads more around that type of scenario and kind of think through of like how should we set this up, because a big part of it too is the issue of how are students going to like enable or switch to that. So let's say if if you're working with 5th grade students that need to do that, we would want to make sure that the interface is set up so that the 5th grade students can easily be working through problems that way without it being, like buried in menus or being some really complex thing that they wouldn't understand. So the more stories, the better about students, or really ideally be happy to set up a video chat and kind of hear more about it. And then William solved my problem for the cross out and replace on a MacBook. He held down the function key and then the shortcut key. So he did function, control, delete, shift. Thank you, William. I will have to send you some stickers, which I should show off right now. So we got some new stickers. We have our classic Mathshare sticker here. It's nice. It's not amazing. It's nothing to like write home about, but it's cool. I got a couple of them on my computer. Oh, geez, am I going to find these things? Here we go. But after a lot of people really love the t-shirts, but unfortunately, mailing t-shirts is crazy expensive for some reason. I got to figure out a cheaper way to mail t-shirts. But I've made these then as a sticker. So I don't know if it's backwards or not, but it says every student learns in their own way. And we got a little Mathshare thing down here at the bottom. So William, I will go ahead and mail that to you. And if anybody on this video chat would like one of these stickers, go ahead and send me a message and I'll be happy to drop one in the mail for you. Which I don't have to sit in line at the post office for mailing stickers, which is a huge plus. It's the worst time to go to the post office right now. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop.